video. So if there's anything that you've missed, send me an email and I'll send you the link to the private video of that, because I could only I have to have one link for each video, the way that YouTube does the private stuff. So I'll send you a link if you need it for something you missed. Sadly, the camera focuses on me the whole time, which is a bit distracting. So I got a wide shot this morning, so you'll see all the books.
But you know, Dawn, in the past 2 Tuesdays that I've missed, thank you so much for sending those, because they've been very, very valuable. It's lovely to hear you, and lovely to hear the comments from other folks too, and almost wanting to go, oh,
jump in, yeah.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
Well, as we'll give it a minute or two more, I just a little housekeeping. There's no gathering next Tuesday. We're taking a break, and then the following Tuesday we will begin with where is it? It's over here. John Philip Newell's book, Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul. And for ease of transition, it'll be the same Zoom link all the way through. It's locked in on the same Zoom link. We'll start with this. Now, I've had some requests from people to do this in the evening, and I'm tinkering with my schedule to see if it's possible to do another session during the week in the evening on this. But it's, yeah, stay tuned. It might happen. But for now, the morning session is starting 2 weeks from today. The other thing is,
are we doing, Dawn, are we doing it chapter by chapter, or
everybody asks me that.
How should we prepare?
I would say as long as you've read the first 2 chapters, you'll be safe for the first session. People always ask me, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna start with? Where are you gonna go? And when I'm doing a book with a group, I like to listen to the group during the first session to see where they're at, to see where their questions are, their interests are, and then tinker with it. Because I find there's nothing bores me more than going chapter by chapter by chapter. It's like, okay, so we've got 4 sessions, which we can extend to 6 if we have to. And during those 4 sessions, I want to, zero in on what I hear coming from you out of the first session. So I'll zero in on the one of either the first or the second chapter in the beginning. There's some things I'd like to talk about there already. I could do a whole 4 sessions on chapter 1. Like, that's how, hang on. Andrew, can you,
I don't see that I am yet.
Okay, I'm going to make you the co-host. Sorry, we've got someone who's trying to get in and can't find the link. Where's Andrew on here?
In the dark.
Andrew, are you the numbered person? Andrew?
Oh, I've got a number. I got to change that right now.
Okay.
Rename.
It's not letting me make you a co-host for some reason. Let me just, here we go. Okay, now, I made you a host, I think. No, can't do that. Come on, Zoom. Notice I'm blaming Zoom for this. Right, okay, now, I'm just going to go out and...
I'm now co-host, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to go out and send a link to Deborah, who's trying to get in. Deborah.
Last night, we had a church meeting, and some people who were online saying, you have all this wonderful stuff, and I'm working. I can't do the daytime. So that's quite exciting. There are people that would like to be part, and so we're going to be visiting and having faithCHAT or book studies with an evening slot as well. And the Keeners, I guess, could come to both. But,
all right, there's Shanti and Deborah. I've sent her the link, so hopefully she'll get in. Yeah, so as long as you're in the first 2 chapters, you'll be fine in the first session. And I will try and give you a heads up. Like after the first session, I'll know where I'm going next, and I'll try and give you a good heads up. But it's. Are you liking the book? How's it going?
Yeah.
Is it good?
Not very much. Yeah.
Okay. Before I begin, I just want to see how many people managed to watch the Rob Bell video. So That was the one on rhythm, Andrew. You've seen it before.
Oh, yes,
but-
sorry.
yeah.
I always say I haven't done it. Really. Yeah, I have.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, for reminding me of that video. I own the entire Zoom DVD set. That's how old it is. It's in DVDs. 2005, I think, it came out. And I've used them with lots and lots of groups. The caveat I have with them now is they're old. And Rob Bell has come a long way in terms of his thinking. Those were created shortly after he left the mega church that he had founded in the United States. And at the time, it was one of the largest mega churches in the United States. And so he was on the fringe already, but now he's really moved away from what's called the emerging church movement and into the progressive movement and beyond. He's been roundly criticized ever since he appeared on Oprah, and a lot of that criticism is jealousy, I think. But he's a brilliant communicator of ideas and thoughts, and I have taken 2 courses with Rob on how to communicate over this medium, and each time I've been blown away by. I tend to be a manuscript speaker. I'm in a small group. I'm comfortable with speaking without a manuscript, but in a large group, I want my manuscript. I don't always preach from the manuscript. I sometimes disappear into the ether somewhere when I'm talking. But he's brilliant at hour and a half long speeches that don't vary from place to place when he does them. So he's a brilliant communicator. This piece I find particularly well done because it well, I'll talk more about that as I go along. We're going to talk today primarily about public prayer, what it is, and leading public prayer. And I thought where I would begin is with probably the first public prayer that most of us are familiar with, and that is what's known as the Lord's Prayer. And one of the reasons I think it's important for us to start with the Lord's Prayer is because it creates all kinds of constraints for those of us who were raised in the Christian tradition, and it inhibits us. We think that we need to follow a similar formula, or we need to pray in the same way. And after all, Jesus said it, so like that's the law. So I would like to look at this particular story of where the Lord's Prayer comes from a different perspective, and it's a perspective that freed me when I first heard it, and I'm going to credit a wise seminary professor, Donna Simone, who asked me this question and changed my perspective on this story completely. And okay, I'm getting there. Here she comes.
It comes
Yeah.
to me eventually.
Yeah, no, I've had somebody emailing and get me in, so I'm just putting it on do not disturb here. Sorry folks, I didn't mean to. There we go. So this perspective is one that looks at how did the story of Jesus teaching the Lord's Prayer come into our scriptures? Where did it come from, and how did it rise to the surface, and what's its life been since it was canonized as, sacred scripture and the Word of God. And so I'd like you to sort of imagine you've left your life behind, and you're following this itinerant preacher in a radical movement designed to subvert empire. And you're trying to convince your neighbors or people in towns where you go that this guy is onto something, this Jesus fellow is onto something. And you hear that John the Baptist, who is the man of the hour, has given his followers a prayer to pray, right? And these are primarily Jewish people, although there are some non-Jews in Jesus' following. And for Jews, at the time, the importance of having a prayer. They woke up every morning saying the same prayer. They ate their meals with the same prayer. They greeted guests with similar prayers. They went to bed praying the same prayer every day. And John the Baptist gives his followers a prayer. Jesus' followers don't have a prayer. And so if you
Sorry.
read the story, Jesus resists. There's an element of resistance here. And so if you read the story as Jesus, preaching to the multitudes, coming back to his faithful followers, and they're nagging him, we need a prayer. John the Baptist has a prayer. Teach us a prayer. And he kind of goes, oh, for heaven's sake. All right, you want a prayer? Here's a prayer. And Jesus gives them this prayer, which is formulaic. And if you look at the prayer carefully, it's an attempt to move away from any kind of intercessory prayer to a more justice-centered prayer. The prayer gets more and more just. It's about creating heaven on earth, which is, and I'm talking about the bare bones prayer, not the church's expansion of it. So that prayer, from the time that question was asked to me, what makes you think Jesus was serious? What makes you think Jesus wasn't annoyed and was just giving them something to shut them up? And that released my imagination. And so when I think of that right now, that prayer, I think of, and this is going to date me, it's a Seinfeld character, George Costanza, the little guy in Seinfeld. I imagine him as Jesus, and he's given him a prayer. And at the end of it, he just goes, yada, 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 yada. And so for me, what that does, some of you will suggest that it's sacrilegious or heretical, and yeah, sure, who cares? I'm not. I aspire to heresy, so that's fine. What it does, though, is it frees me from thinking of this prayer as a formula for public prayer. And so the conversation about the formula for public prayer and what we're doing in public prayer happened in a bar after I'd led morning worship at the seminary. And it was the Wednesday service, which was the extended one where we lead the Eucharist. And for MDiv students, that was really high pressure because you were critiqued on it afterwards. And I led this service with a team, and immediately after the service, a woman came up to me and said, "Thank you so much. That worship service was the answer to my prayers." And it was the morning of the Swiss Air disaster. The plane had crashed early that morning. We knew there were several hundred people who were dead, and all I could think of was, your God is a bastard. If he's answering your prayers with this worship and letting those people fall out of the sky. And so it's that conversation about the formula for the Lord's Prayer as formula for public prayer happened in the bar that evening. And it freed my imagination from then on to say, what are we doing in public when we pray? And I would argue that the Rob Bell piece that you watched is public prayer. The whole piece is a prayer, right? It's opening you to the more, to the mystery. It's inviting you into a place that's beyond discourse, that has an element of mystery. And I don't mean mystery as in, oh, mysterious, I don't understand that. But I mean as that thing which inspires awe and wonder. And I think if our public prayer can invite people into that, it becomes more than yada, yada, yada. It becomes an experience of the other, the more, the beyond, the one that we call God. And so it expands what public prayer is, what it can be in terms of experience, and my hope is that it frees people from needing a prayer or a formula for prayer, and empowers people to, in the course of their day, come out of an experience and go, oh, I was just praying there, right? Recognizing prayer in our everyday life. If we can model that in public, and it's really difficult to do, and I know that as much as I sometimes try to do it, it fails, it falls on its face. But those moments when it succeeds, and you come out of it and you're like, wow, we really went somewhere. We were in the presence of the divine, the one that in whom we live, and the one who lives in, with, through, and beyond us. And so that's what excites me about learning new ways to lead public prayer. And by lead, I don't mean in the I'm out front, right? I mean it more in my nanny's Irish way, which is follow me, I'm right behind you. It means empowering people to move. Ritually speaking, we would talk about it in terms of rite of passage. So a rite of passage is you enter in one form, the experience moves you, and you come out in the same place but slightly changed. Comments?
I would say
Responses?
that's great, and it's probably a sermon. I'm glad you recorded that. I think this should be.
I really shy away from talking about this, and the reason I shy away from talking about it, it's like it's one of those things where it's, you recognize it when you've experienced it, but talking about it almost undoes it. And I recognize that is also a cop-out, right? Because we need to express what we're striving for here, in terms of public prayer. Now, there are techniques, and we'll get to that later, that you can do that make your facilitation or your leadership more a kind of, I'm right behind you. I'm cheering you on. I'm helping you to see where you might want to go, rather than, dear God, we're so happy to be here this morning. And we're here in Keswick, Ontario, Canada, in case whatever you're praying to doesn't know where you are. There's been this disaster, and we just want you to take care of everybody, and make sure that there are doctors and nurses there. It's like that. I mean, I learned as a layperson during the liturgical renewal movement how to write the prayers of the people, right? You begin by praising God, and there's like 7 steps. You got to pray for, you praise God, you pray for the world, you pray for your country, you pray for the church, you pray for the people, and you've got all these elements covered, and then you wind it all up by telling God what a great God is. Those are the prayers of the people. That has morphed in our community into something completely different. It's now time for the prayers of the people, and all I do is say that when we pray, we do not pray to some sky god, hoping that God will grant our wishes. I'm not quite that crass, I don't think. I haven't led public prayer for so long that I can't even remember the words I use. But it's our God is beyond our comprehension, and it's a way of opening. And I begin by inviting people to share with one, and I also encourage people to keep their eyes open, and I encourage them to. I begin by saying I invite you to share those things for which you are grateful. and people just spontaneously express what they're grateful for. And then I will say something to the effect, I invite you to share your concerns. I usually say for creation, and then I invite people to share their concerns for the world, and people will just pop up what's happening, and then I invite them to share their concerns for the people in their lives, and that happens. And then I usually wind it up by some words about how our hope is that our prayers will move us or open us so that the one who is love can have life in us, and we can be the love necessary to respond to these concerns. And that's how we've taken the formulaic prayers of the people, and sometimes it works, and sometimes people aren't in the mood for it, and it falls flat. And you can throw some words in there, some that will help people think, oh yeah, I am concerned about this. People will come up to me afterwards and say that when they heard someone say this, they wondered how they could be helpful. What could they do? When people express concerns for the people in their lives, that's a really intimate moment for me. And oftentimes you will hear stuff. When people say nothing and stand there silently weeping, that's an invitation. Their tears are part of the prayer. And I will see people during the peace seeking those people who are weeping out to make sure they're okay. So the prayer continues. It has taken us years of tiny steps to get there. Now, there are also formal prayers of the day, which you lead, and the worship team now crafts beautiful prayers. But in all of that, there needs to be an understanding that we're not naming who and what the divine mystery which we call God is. We're opening ourselves to that. And one of the ways to shut it down is to personify the deity. If I used to use all kinds of names, and some Sundays I will use different names for God if we're doing something to try and awaken people to the multitudinous names that have arisen out of the people for the divine mystery. But usually in prayer, I try to encourage people not to personify the deity, which causes all kinds of problems because people say, am I allowed to say that? Yeah, you can say Father if you want. That if that's what rises out of you, Father rises out of you. So go for that. But recognize that you might be shutting half a dozen people down. Is that really what you want to do? Is there another way to express that? And constantly sort of opening people up to new ways to express that. But once the leader or those who are in leadership begin to personify the deity, you're already shrinking the experience. So it's always, when you're leading public prayer, is to open. Imagine the orans position, right, which is a Latin word for prayer, or the orans, like the supplicant. I can't do it on this camera. Let's move it farther away. See if I can do it. So there's a rigid way to do the orans, and you kind of go like this, right? And that, to me, is a posture of discomfort because our body needs to be in the prayer. And I often still see priests and pastors do this, right? And they just kind of do this, right? It just kind of goes, whoo. Let me get my microphone out of the way here. But if it's an opening, and the reason it's not that that's important and that everybody has to do that, but this is my reminder as a leader that my job is to open people rather than shut them down. Does that make any sense?
Oh, total. Absolutely.
It's difficult to inspire confidence in people if the folks leading prayers don't have confidence. And so that's what's one of the things that's been wonderful to watch through this whole lockdown experience is how confident the worship team has become in crafting prayers. And it is an art form. Crafting public prayer is an art form. I mean, and the last thing you want to do is be so crafty that people notice how crafty it is.
But it's the performance.
Yeah,
part is it.
yeah. It's a delicate dance. Jackie?
I was thinking in terms of some of the things we were talking about last night at the meeting about involving the people in the extended congregation. And I'm wondering, this is just a suggestion. I know you don't want a whole bunch of silence on a pre-recorded video, but what would it be like if during the prayers of the people, there was just a moment silence, so that I'm an introvert and I can't listen and process at the same time. And so just as you would ask people to mention what they're concerned about in the world, if you left a small moment for response in the video, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah. And I've struggled with that throughout all of this. This medium is not conducive to silences. And images help. So if you're not just staring at faces, you're staring at images. So we try to mix it up a little bit. And one of the places where we were able to do that a little bit was when we did the Lenten morning prayer piece. There was more time for reflection. And my hope is that when we do the Advent midweek services, that they will be more contemplative in that way. The other thing that I would say is, I used to get nervous when I first started trying to seed this, because there would be lots of silence. And I've talked to other colleagues who've tried it in their congregations, and I remember one colleague came up to me and he said, you know, I tried it twice and I quit because all we had was silence. And I just looked at him and I said, wonderful. You know, wonderful. Like if you can be comfortable in the silence with a group of people, there's such intimacy there. Now, you get to a place where you can read the room and you can read the people shuffling, or you can read the faces that are saying we're kind of done and we need to, the silence is just awkward. Like you need to learn to read that, but that comes with time. It's difficult on this medium to do that kind of stuff. So when I see the prayers come in, I get delighted when you see they've got it. Our worship team is great, right? You guys, there's a couple of you on here, so but it's like, yep, they're doing exactly what needs doing. And Ron Grimes, who is the ritual studies guru that is one of my mentors, he used to say your first question always when you're planning ritual is, what needs doing? And that's a tricky thing, because most of us were never given the freedom to walk into a church and say, what needs doing? What do these people need? What do these, you know, so as leaders in communities, what does this community need? Do they need silence? Do they need lament? Do they need time to pray? Do they need to rend their garments? Do they need to laugh, sing? What needs doing? What we were given was, here's the liturgy. Now do it, and do it well. And people will figure a way in and they'll figure a way out, and they'll go home uplifted. that's not how ritual works anymore, if it ever did. Don't get me wrong, I love liturgy, traditional liturgy done really well. It moves me. But I'm a minority on the planet. There aren't too many people who love that anymore. People have other options. Anyway, I'm moving off into areas that aren't necessary. What I wanted to hear from you today is what in a public setting opens you to the more, to the mystery, to the awe.
What? Silence. Silence more than. Can I say a few words?
Please do.
I've been struggling with the Lord's Prayer, and when it comes time to say it, I don't say it anymore, but the people expect it. So I've been doing it in different languages. And Kwakwala is the language that we've chosen to do it in, because that was the language that was robbed from the survivors. And in the beginning, it was, I said, well, you know what the words are. I don't need to translate it. But it just gets so complicated. Trying to get rid of the sky god and get rid of ritual is very difficult. And I have a lot of elderly people who are very close to the door who love all that stuff. And I have children who are running around, and I don't want to give them the sky god. And my big issue is doing prayer well. So I start with silence and one word, thank you, and then silence. And I increase the silence every time. So they're getting used to it. And I'm almost eliminating the Lord's Prayer, but not. And it's a real challenge to feed the children in a way that we weren't fed. And I have, and then they want to sing Jesus Loves Me. And the words of Jesus Loves Me are just cringingly bad.
I'm trying to remember them.
I am weak, but he is strong. Yeah. And take away my sin, and off to heaven I'm going to go. So we changed the words, and we changed the rhythm. And the elderly really, really wanted to sing the old Jesus Loves Me. But we got the rhythm, and we made it really boppy and up there, and handed out instruments. And Jesus Makes Me Strong is what we sing.
Wonderful.
Anyway, I'm kind of going all over the place, but the prayer part to me is the most important part. And translating the old way to this incredible gift of understanding that there is no sky god, it's in, around, and below and above. And getting that to the children is more an aim than it is the adults. We don't have many, we have 8, but anyway, that's sort of a babble, but
no, I would argue that the last thing in the world you want to do is take away ritual or take away the Lord's Prayer. Try a different question. One of the questions is, what is it that those older people are longing for in the saying of the Lord's Prayer, and where is it taking them, and what is it that they're looking for, and then struggle with ways of helping them find that also work for the children, which it sounds like well on the way to doing that. And you know, not just I mean, when I wanted to get away from the argument between, are we doing the King James version of the Lord's Prayer, or are we doing that new version, which is like not quite so new, dates in the 1970s, I guess. So what I did was, one Pentecost Sunday, I stood up at the front. I practiced in front of for hours, and I said it in Aramaic. And nobody knew what I was doing, right? But it was Pentecost, so there was supposed to be people speaking in foreign tongues, right? And then in the bulletin, I had the Lord's Prayer translated in every language I could find. And I put new interpretations of the Greek, there's some beautiful new interpretations in there. And I invited people, and this is before we used all these new interpretations. I invited people, I took some time and I said, choose whichever version you want. I'll say it in Aramaic and you say it in whatever version you want. And we will create this cacophony of sound. It's almost like a recreation of Pentecost. And we've been, it's become, like, the worst part of it is it became a tradition, right? So now every Pentecost we try to do that, and that's just awful. But every, usually Saturday night before Pentecost, I'm sitting in front of my computer trying to relearn the Aramaic, because I can't remember it from one year to the next. But there's so much noise going on out there that usually just the worship assistant can hear me. But my point is that when we're trying to open people up, we have to remember where their feet are and allow them to have one foot in the tradition that has fed them for their whole lives. And otherwise, what you do is, you know, it's almost like whipping the ground out from under their feet, and they're supposed to figure out how to walk in this new place. I want to go back there where I know what's expected of me, what comes next. I want to hear the bells ringing when we start saying the Lord's Prayer. I want to know, you know, that this is, you know, the faith of our fathers. So in ritual, the last thing you want to do is close people down. You want this open peace. And so you have to say, how do I allow people to have the ground to stand on, the familiar ground to stand on, one foot in the tradition, and lift one of those feet to move forward into this new space. And that takes years. It doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes younger clergy will come to me and say, well, how do I do that in my parish? And I say, stick around for 20 years and you'll get there. Because it took us about 10 years to move from doing liturgy out of the book to creating liturgy. And fortunately, the church helped us, because they put out a brand new hymnal in the Lutheran Church that was just like the old hymnal. And it was enough to say, for people to throw it over their shoulders and say, hey, okay, let's do it ourselves. The church isn't going to do it for us. And so this opening piece is what we need to do. And don't shun ritual. Ritual is the most powerful, moving, experiential thing that happens in a human life. And part of our problem is the English word ritual has been equated with routine or rote. Ritual is exceptional. It's extraordinary. It's not brushing your teeth every morning. It's not doing things by rote. It's entering in to a ritualized experience that frees you to move out into the more, the so much more than the ordinary. It's a facilitation of the extraordinary. And ritual has the power to move people in those ways. And ritual happens beyond the confines of the sanctuary. Ritual happens everywhere. and encouraging people to craft and create ritual that moves people is huge. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. Thank you, Deborah. Your tangent led to my tangent. Anybody else want to help us find some ground here? Linda.
So many things I'm thinking of during this whole thing, but I think you're right, Dawn, in talking about the invitation. And when you said the word experiential, that really resonates with me. Experiential and visceral. And I think that's one of the small reasons why I chose to walk away from my church, is because it was no longer either of those. There was no longer the experiential warmth, invitation, visceral, almost holy feeling of walking into this building with these people. It's almost like the words go too fast. And if you have a leader who speaks right from the heart, from the soul, and even pauses in between the words and has a way to make the prayers dance or move like they're a dynamic line, it just feels that much more visceral. It almost is like osmosis. Mm-hmm. It's like that person is transmitting the energy in and your energy is going out. And if there's an invitation to focus on the candle, the lit candle at the front of the church, or focus on the stained glass windows if you have those in your building, or take the time to focus on something in your environment that has meaning, still allows the ritual to happen, but it creates more of a visceral, intimate experience. And in my experience, that flew out the window a long time ago.
Well, I think in defense of the organized church, the kind of intimacy you're talking about disappeared from our culture a long time ago. You know, a long time ago, people grew up in the same neighborhoods. They knew the same people. They went to the same church. Each gathering, they knew the people. They knew, you know, there's the person who brings the casserole when someone dies. Here's the person who does the flowers. And so there was more of there was not a need to create intimacy. Intimacy just was. And in some ways, the ritual then has a different role. It's to inhibit the intimacy so that people can focus, right? And so that's why the Ron Grimes question, what needs doing, means that you have to read the community. If I went into a high liturgical church made up of, let me just be insensitive and say wasps, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who are of considerable wealth, and ask the question, what needs doing? The answers of how to accomplish that what needs doing would be completely different. They might need a fully ranked organ and, you know, a massed choir singing, Andrew help me, something lofty and wonderful. They might need that in order to move into the more, in order to be lifted out of their place in this rigid, frozen chosen kind of world that they're in. And so what needs doing with the ritual is something completely different. However, for it to be authentic, if I were in there trying to craft it, there needs to be, for me to be authentic as a leader, the sky god couldn't come, right? So there's where the ritual challenges us to move to the new place, to pass over into a new place. It's like the ritual dies when the ritual just confirms your existence, where you are, and doesn't attempt to challenge you or move you. And so, for example, Linda, I'm gonna use you as the foil here. So if that's not okay, just wave and I'll stop. Your desire for an intimate, slower paced experience in liturgy is one I resonate with, right? And where the problem is, and this is where when you're crafting this kind of stuff, where the problem is you can accomplish that and not move anybody anywhere. So where do you come in and say, here's the justice rub. While you're busy enjoying your lovely intimacy, the people outside the front door are starving. There's no time for what you're doing. Get out there and feed the people. Now, I've created a couple of straw people here that exaggerates the situation, but I'm trying to make the point that whatever we're doing in terms of corporate prayer, because I think that's what all of the service is, the music, the song, the stained glass windows, the silences, all of that is the prayer. It's the collective corporate prayer. When we're doing that and we're saying what needs doing, it's very easy for us to cater to the perceived needs of the assembly, of the people who have gathered, rather than what needs doing for the health of the community. Where do I need to challenge in this prayer? Where do I need to say, hey, this isn't about you anymore. This isn't about what you need. This isn't about what you like. It's not about your top 10 favorite hymns. It's not about your desire for silence. It's about nourishing all of us so that we can go out into the world and be love. And that love can live in, with, through, and beyond us. That's what this prayer is about. This entire service, this entire gathering, the coffee afterwards, right? That's part of it too. All of it is to not just cater to your needs, which culturally there was a different understanding in past generations. Now, if our needs aren't being met, we brush the dust from our feet and we move to a different town, or we select new friends, and we don't have to put up with the stuff we don't like. There's a reason we call it a worship service. You don't go to have your needs met. You go to be present to whatever happens there. It's a service that you're rendering to the community, to the culture. And we've lost some of that understanding. And you can't do that if some of your needs aren't met, right? If you go every Sunday and they never sing your favorite hymn, or they never have enough silence, or you never feel fed, well, it's really hard to give the gift of your presence. It's why when people say, I miss this or I miss that, I say, stick around, it'll happen in 6 weeks from now. For now, so-and-so needs us to do this, or the health of the community needs that. Does that make sense, Linda? It can be harsh because we go wanting and needing certain things from that prayer. And the reality is we're not going to get it. It's like going to a funeral, right? But I didn't know the person. No, but the family needs people around to help them grieve. So we're not going to grieve at all. We're going to give the gift of our presence to whoever it is that we love who's grieving. It's as much of a gift as dropping off the casserole dish, the gift of our presence. I saw a hand waving, Jackie and
Steve and Jackie.
Okay.
Steve?
Okay. This is a little bit off track, but I think it needs to be said. This what needs doing question should have been asked during the congregational meeting last night. In other words, what needs doing not only applies to liturgy, it applies to the whole life of the church. And it's not, and you have to answer that first. What needs doing, and you have to define your community. What is your community? Just like you said in liturgy. And then what needs doing? And I think that needs to be the starting point, and that leads you in a different direction. And with that, I'm going to let it go at that. Because we could go, we spend hours on that, but I just want to.
Thank you for that, Steve. That's a very important reminder. I do appreciate it. Jackie.
So many things are going around in my head. I think you have helped me understand my dissatisfaction with my congregation, because it seemed as if the liturgy, the hymnody, the preaching were all comforting. They were all either traditional or me and Jesus kind of music, or even the sermons were God will give you hope, God will give you comfort. Never or very rarely the social issues, the challenges. So that's one thing. My sister, a number of years ago, was very disillusioned with the church. And she had a friend who was like 100 years old. And the way she was able to keep participating in that congregation was to say, I can sing this old song, or I can say this old prayer for Edna, because that's what Edna needs. Then, as long as then Edna would do something that fed me, you know. So there's that kind of give and take. It's the way to be a community, right? So once she stopped focusing on her own needs and said, well, there are others who need other things, she was able to continue in that more traditional community. The other thing is that one of the great disappointments with that Lutheran hymn, the latest Lutheran hymn book, was they created 10 settings of the liturgy and never changed a word of a word. And I'm a word person. So that was just totally disappointing.
I remember being excited when the copy was delivered, and I wept through those 10 liturgies. Yeah.
But there is something about liturgy, and I think the Lord's Prayer as well. They're meant to be dynamic, and yet we reduce them to rote, and that happens so easily. You know, I've been working with a small group of the older women in my congregation, and we began, and I was interested in your format, you know, that you mentioned a few minutes ago for prayer, because we decided as a group, it was quite intimate, and as a group at the end, I would try to open them to, the leader doesn't have to say the prayer, and so, you know, giving them an opportunity to bring forward what they're grateful for and what their concerns are. We haven't quite got past the God language thing, but at least it's a start. So many lay people say, I can't pray in public because I don't know what to say. I don't know the words. You know, I don't know the right words. Only leaders say that. So anyway, that's some of what's going around in my head, and I'll stop there.
Yeah. I think that your initial comment about I can sing this for so-and-so is an important one, and it's one I encourage people to do, but you can't always be singing it for so-and-so, right? You know, I joke that music takes us to places that no other medium can take us. And whenever a song comes on the radio by Tammy Wynette, Stand By Your Man, I turn the volume up and I sing it loudly and with gusto, because my memory of that song is riding in a car with my dad and singing it with my dad. It takes me to a different place. It has no bearing on my reality. I mean, I love Carol. I don't want to stand by anybody's man. Not even the Jesus man. I'm not like that's, but I can sing that and I can enjoy singing it. But if you asked me to sing it every third Sunday, that would get old and tired and I'd be done, right? So there's a place for those familiar pieces. And one of the things that I've been doing for 12 years now is finding new words to familiar tunes. There's a reason those tunes are familiar. They're singable. Even people like me who I find it difficult to stay on tune or in key or any of that. Carol's smiling. She has to put up with my singing when, at home. And I can sing them. I know how I can follow the music. And if you can find new words that open people to new ways of understanding, it's like, whoa. Yeah, they can't sing them without consulting the text. That's the COVID thing has been great because we can just put the text on the screen and people can sing them. But it moves you. Plus, as a crafter of liturgy, you can really play with stuff, because supposing it's Mother's Day and you have new words to, what's that song? Faith of our fathers, living faith. You can see, yeah. It's Faith of our fathers, right? You can put words in there that people think, what are we doing Faith of our fathers? They hear the intro. Why are we doing Faith of our fathers? It's Mother's Day. And then suddenly everybody starts Faith of our mothers. And that's huge, but you can do it more subtly, right? With a theology that's how great thou art, right? I love that tune. How great thou art. I can butcher it when I sing it, but I love that tune. And I don't want anybody taking that music away from me. The new words are to the effect, I can't do it in my head. God is beyond. God is beyond.
God is beyond.
Yeah, and you put that up and let people sing a whole new thing, and whatever that music did for them, however that music grounded them in their lives, now they have words to express this beyond piece. And the first couple of times you sing something like that, people will complain, I like the old words, but eventually those complaints fall away. So it's okay to sing that stuff for so-and-so who really needs to hear it, but sing it occasionally. And it's like the only place I draw the line is it's not okay to say the creed in public worship and be authentic. It's not okay to say the creeds. There's a reason why even in our liturgy there are may rubrics. Rubrics are the instructions for the liturgist, and the creeds are a may rubric. May be said. It's because they aren't liturgical. They were political statements crafted to control people. That's not okay in liturgy, because what that does is it tries to shut people down. We have not used any of the church's creeds at Holy Cross for at least 16 years. And when I am in worship in other places, synodical places, I do not speak those words. I check out of the service. And I look around and see half the clergy are doing the same thing. You just can't do it. It's not authentic. It's not. It's malpractice as far as I'm concerned. Unless you believe that's shit. Sorry. If you believe that, say away. But you have to be able to draw lines. So I can't do this for so and so. I can't say kingdom. I can't say it. Not in liturgy. I will not say kingdom. It's a stupid English word. And Jesus would not have been a king. We can't have Christ the King Sunday. That was a political holiday crafted by the Vatican to establish an argument that Jesus was the king of the world. Well, the Jesus of Nazareth that I know and have read about fought his whole life not to be called king. It was the insult that Pilate put on the damn cross, right? Here he is, King of the Jews. So I can't say kingdom, and I won't say it, and I won't participate in worship that uses that. I can say kingdom, the family, kin. The problem with that in worship is it's not jarring enough, because people think, oh, I just didn't hear the G, So I usually, for years, I used to just keep it with the original Greek, which is basileia. And I would talk about the basileia of God, but then you have to unpack all, what does basileia mean, this, that, and the other thing. So the whole thing about Christianity is it is an alternative, a rejection of empire. So you do draw some lines in worship, and so you don't, the Jesus loves me thing, you got to get, like, if it's bad theology, you got to get new words. And the same goes for Psalms, right? The Psalms were written by a culture that was violent. And so this veneration of the Psalms, some of them you just don't use in public worship. And to argue that that's cutting and pasting, that's enshrined in liturgy. Pericope, the word itself means cut. So you cut little verses and you create the pericope that you want. I mean, look at what's prescribed reading in traditional churches. They cut out the lines they don't like. We will never say we will never read the part where, words are put into the mouth of God that says, dash their babies' heads against the rocks. Like, hello, if that's your God, I'm not sure I want to be intimate with you. So, we've gone a little over time. Sorry about the rants. I'm passionate about crafting liturgy, absolutely passionate. I love this part of my job. And I often see clergy who are also passionate about it until they've been slammed against the wall by parishioners' complaints, one time too many. And so they just say, damn it, I'm going to give them what they want. And, most congregations need people like you to push and say, hey, do we really believe that? Do we really want our children to think that that's what we believe? It's really, and clergy need support. Like, when they do something out of the box, they're going to get a complaint or two. And we're taught in seminary, at least I was taught, if one person is complaining, they probably represent about 15 or 20 others who don't have the guts to come and complain to your face. So when we hear one complaint, that's why we fold. It can be demoralizing to do that. And so you either develop a bit of a thick skin or in the early days. But once you see it start to blossom, it's amazing. And then you get to step out of the equation because people can do this for themselves. They don't need clergy, right? People can do this for themselves. And the other piece of this that's important is public prayer models a way of being for our lives. If you can recognize silence in public prayer as an intimate encounter of the divine, you can then recognize it in your own life. And so it's a model for our private prayer life or our family prayer life. And so one of the functions of public prayer is to inspire people, give people the breath to pray themselves. And that's really exciting, even though it's daunting and terrifying. But we're trying to engage the source of reality. We're trying to engage divinity, and that ought to be daunting. And we have to have the courage to mess up. I mean, I'm only telling you about the successes. There's been lots of failures, right? Those of you who've been there. Remember my failed efforts to have the people do the words of institution? I almost got my marching orders over that one. I had this bright idea that people have been going to Eucharist their whole lives, and so all you needed to do was take the Eucharistic rite within the service and invite people to do it. So the top piece of the Eucharistic piece tells the story of God's interaction with God's people, right? That's the first paragraph in the liturgy. And the second one talks about the story of Jesus. And then the third piece is the actual words of institution. So I just explained that to folks, and then I said, now, somebody, in your own words, tell me about God's interaction with God's people. Dead silence. Dead silence. You know, and eventually when we got to the Jesus story, folks were a little more comfortable with that. And we tried it because I always say try things for like 4 Sundays at least, and people stopped coming. Like, they didn't want, the silence was that awkward. And what I learned from that was, and that's why you have a worship team. You say you folks are going to seed this, right? You're prepared going in, right? So it's planned spontaneity. As much as that, but you've got to have the courage to fall into those awkward silences and learn from them. You know, you don't just do this unannounced. You gotta have people who are prepared to drop some crumbs for people to help them, you know, find the way. It's tough stuff, but it's exciting.
What I find very empowering is reflecting on times when people have been open and people crave authenticity, people crave stuff that rings true, and they also would, it was Jane, nobody, when you're with somebody and you feel like they're putting on a show and they're trying to impress you, you just want it to end. And yet if somebody's with you and you feel like you're getting a glimpse of who they really are, it's like, oh, this is really special. This is worth it. And same thing happens in worship and in gatherings. In this gathering, where we get the sense that when people talk here, nobody's trying to impress anybody. That people are saying, this is where I am, this is my struggle point, this is my working point. And if we just are humble with that and seek that and don't pretend to have the answers, but create, like Don tries, an environment where it's safe to do that. And as people gather, they have this rare thing that doesn't happen so much. In the outside world, people just do all these automatic pleasantries most of the time. And here's a place where it's more than that. And both in the message that's been given, it's not just to support the status quo. It's to say, this is something more dynamic, and this is what I'm wrestling with. This is what we're wrestling with. This is a growing edge that we might want to look at. And all of us, I think, respond to that. And if we knew that was coming, we'd say, okay, I'm willing to take that risk because it's so much more than same old, same old.
There's a bit of a caveat. Sometimes it can undo you, right? And those folks who know me well know that I'm a fairly controlled and prepared person. I like to be prepared within an inch of my life. And one of the good things about the way the liturgy works is after the prayers of the people come the peace, right? Because sometimes the prayers can undo you as a leader. And I've seen this happen to people who have roles in the liturgy become undone during the prayers. I'm lucky because I occasionally during the peace I go into my office because I'm completely undone. The intensity of that is huge, and sometimes when people are in a vulnerable place, you need to protect them because they can't be exposed to that. And there are times during the peace when I've just sort of gently walked people into my office to leave them there to weep because they're just too vulnerable to stay in the community. But when the community sees that kind of thing happen, there's a trust level that there are enough people in the community who will be with that person afterwards, right? That's the thing with liturgy. If you are going to pierce all of the armor that comes into the space, you have to be prepared to tend the wounds afterwards. And that's huge. That for me is why you need leaders in liturgy, because that's their job, is to make sure that that gets done. Not to necessarily do it, but make sure it gets done. And those leaders don't have to be clergy. In fact, sometimes it's better if they're not clergy. But you have to know that there are half a dozen people who have their eyes open and who are willing to tend the wounds. Otherwise, you're committing ritual malpractice.
I think the real challenge for you and all clergy is to realize that people are at different levels of need, and some people, I mean, if the old time religion is working for them, they tend to stay with that, and so we basically all move based on our analysis of what we're at isn't working for us, so we're seeking something else. But there are just some people that you can't move off that step, if you will. And so it is tough to basically, please all the people all the time. And that's where religion, I think, is dying, because we're trying to please old time religion people and not move because we don't want to, we're sensitive to that, but at the same time we're just ignoring the need of others who, the others who are moving onward, and consequently we put the church at risk.
I also think, Steve, that ritual fails when it doesn't attempt to move people from the place that they're at. So for those folks for whom the old-time religion works, a laissez-faire attitude is something that those of us who were raised as liberals, which is a good thing, were designed to say, well, everybody is entitled to their own way of thinking and their own opinion. The problem with that is not every opinion is equally valid. And so we have to be able to otherwise the culture won't move, otherwise the church won't move. And I think that, that old adage where we're supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable goes for those people who are comfortable with their old-time religion. And that's not religion, that's a social club. And there's lots of social clubs out there. And our role and function is to challenge people to move, and that's uncomfortable. Now, you can challenge people to move in a variety of ways, and if you challenge people too harshly or too forcefully, they're not going to move. They're just going to dig their heels in and stay where they are. It's the gentle art of ritual to move people. And sometimes it's the role of religion to express, especially ritually, to express angst and frustration. And so not every service is going to feel nourishing. Sometimes it's going to feel bloody awful. And that's how it should be. When I used to think, let's get rid of Good Friday, because it's such an awful, awful moment in the church. But we need to look at the crucifixions that are happening every day. We need to look at it, and we need to rend our garments, and we need to weep and wail and howl and walk out of the place undone. If you get a chance, read Patrick Otuma's Go in Pieces. It's his brilliant poem, a benediction. And if you don't know Padraig Otuma, find him. He's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant poet and theologian. He happens to be from Belfast. He's working in the States right now, but Go in Pieces. And
You
it's,
should spell out his name on the chat, Don.
I
No,
can,
you can type again.
his name is Padraig, Padraig, and Otuma, O, the little accent
Apostrophe.
mark. It's not an apostrophe.
Oh
It's
no, you're right.
it O, and then Tuma, Tumma. His poetry will take you places you never knew you wanted to go. Brilliant poet. And Pete Rollins, also from Belfast, uses a lot of Padraig's poems in his work. And that's where I first encountered him, actually, was in a retreat with Pete, and Padraig was one of the leaders, and he's an amazing, amazing theologian. We've gone over time. I want to thank you for this. I feel like I've talked way too much today and not heard enough from you folks, so I apologize for that. It's part of my sleepy state. Lovely to see you, Jane. Are you back in the country?
No, coming back tomorrow. Sorry, I thought I was still on Croatian time and I'm on English time.
Well,
so
you're
I missed it.
you're that much closer.
Did you record?
Yes, I'll send you the link. If you don't hear from
Thank
me,
you.
it's because I've left town. It's lovely. I need to tell you folks that you're part of the reason that I survived lockdown. Is this engagement with you folks? It's been a real blessing, and I'm so grateful to each and every one of you who give me the gift of your presence on Tuesday mornings. It's a real huge gift that you give me, and I am very grateful for your blessing. We will pick up this kind of format after the book study again. And the book study will be a lot of this. We just will, instead of using videos, we'll use words from John Philip Newell to inspire our conversation. How you all doing? Good? Good. Well, Carol and I will be off to Vancouver first thing in the morning, and we will be returning on the 15th. Join the Holy Cross folks for Thanksgiving. Americans, you get 2 Thanksgivings. Our Thanksgiving service is already recorded, and it'll go live on Sunday. It'll go up on Sunday morning as usual. So, and I'm looking forward to this book study with you, because I always find that conversations about inspiring books, and this one is really inspiring. But he does that thing with one foot in the tradition and one foot in the now, and so it makes it easy to jump into. Good stuff.
Well, have a great trip, and thank you
you
so much for this.
Peace be with you,
Thank
my
you.
friends. Peace be with you.
Be with you.
Shante, you were quiet today. Missed you.
Oh, she's muted.
You're muted, Sean.
Sorry. Well, no, I've been thinking it's good. Thank you so much.
All right. Good to see you.
My brain is very active.
Good.
A lot of good